Good morning, everyone. This is Jill Reinhardt. I'm the Assistant State Conservationist for Partnerships with the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and I'm going to be your moderator this morning for our annual ICP webinar. I apologize, my video is not working today, but our speakers are all on the line and ready to go, so we're going to get started here. I first want to let you know who our Indiana Conservation Partnership leaders are. These are the folks who are attending our meetings every other month, putting together our annual work plan and supporting that work plan and helping us make sure we're all working collaboratively. Next slide, please. There we go. So we do have 8 organizations that make up the Indiana Conservation Partnership: the State Soil Conservation Board, State Department of Agriculture, our 92 soil and water conservation districts, Department of Environmental Management, Department of Natural Resources, Purdue Extension, the USDA Farm Service Agency, and USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. Next slide, please. Our mission is to work together to leverage our technical, financial, and educational assistance to help economically and environmentally protecting land, water, stewardship decisions, practices, and technologies. So you can see our vision there. ICP's land and water stewardship assistance improves the quality of Indiana's streams, rivers, and lakes, protects our drinking water, and increases soil quality to boost food and fiber production. Next slide. So the folks attending our meetings and representing these organizations for the Natural Resources Conservation, we have Jerry Rayner, the State Conservationist, and myself. For the Farm Services Agency, we have Stephanie Alexander and Jason Kishton with the Conservation Programs area of FSA. For the State Soil Conservation Board, we have Brad Dawson, who is the chair, and Larry Clemens attends as an alternate board member. For the IASWCD, representing the districts, Joe Schmies, Executive Director. Next slide. For Purdue Extension, Rick Foster, the Program Leader of Ag and Natural Resources, and Walt Sell, the Assistant Program Leader. For the State Department of Agriculture, Jordan Sager, the Deputy Director. And for the State Department of Natural Resources, Josh Griffin with the Division of Fish and Wildlife. And for the Department of Environmental Management, Mary Lou Renshaw, Branch Chief in the Office of Water, and Julia Wickard, our Ag Liaison. So again, those are the folks attending meetings, putting together the work plan, leveraging all of our financial and technical assistance. And you're going to hear about those updates first with, next slide, please, with Jordan Sager sharing our ICP accomplishments report. And then we'll walk through all of the rest of our updates. At the end, we will take questions. So if you could save your questions for the end of all the presentations, and you can type those in the chat box, and we'll be answering those after every presentation happens. With that, I'm going to ask for the next slide and turn it over to Jordan Sager to get us started. Jordan?
Thanks, Jill. Just making sure everybody can hear me okay.
I can hear you.
Excellent. Thank you, Jill. Thank you for moderating, and thank you to Purdue for hosting us here. I want to say good morning to the partnership. It's one of my favorite times of year when I can talk about our collective accomplishments over this past year, calendar year 2019, highlight some of the work that you all made possible. And do want to start off by thanking everybody for continuing to adapt during these times. I know our work goes on and we're doing a little different way, and I know that's appreciated, that we're all adapting as we go. Next slide, please. So again, want to talk about our collective accomplishments. Again, looking back at this calendar year 2019, it's been a really good year. And I'll highlight that through my slides here that will follow. But do want to thank the partnership leaders Jill mentioned for this collaboration, for all of you on the ground, making it happen in the field. And special thanks to Trevor Lowry's for putting together the slides I'm going to go over with you all. This just is a snapshot of where to find all this information I'm going to talk about. It's all public. It's all online. If you just search Indiana Conservation Accomplishments, you'll see it pop up. But this is also on our landing page with the Department of Ag. It is also on the Indiana Conservation Partnership webpage. Next slide. For those curious, just wanted to walk through kind of our data flow and give you a visual of our partnership and our collaboration actually at work in motion. And this is something that we share with a lot of other states, kind of our process, what we do. It's pretty unique to us. We're one of the few states that's the only states that's condensing and publishing information, conservation data in this type of way. So just to kind of shows you some of the key players. A lot of these names are going to be familiar to you all. These are the folks that make all this happen, and I'm just the spokesman really to be able to highlight some of their work here. Note the carbon sequestration piece there circled in red. I'm going to talk more about that. That's actually a new metric that we added this year, which I'm happy to share with all of you. Slide. So again, all this information online, you can go check it out here. It's a new format this year. We've gotten away from a long PDF. We actually made a more interactive kind of interface. So with using some Esri story maps, again, thanks to a lot of our crew that continues to innovate how we display this information. All this information is also easy enough to get on a mobile device. So pretty sweet interface. Again, what I'm talking about is looking back at calendar year 2019. We all have different fiscal years, get that. But we've got to have some way to kind of put some guardrails up and start quantifying our work and looking at the outcomes. What we're looking at here is a snapshot that shows over 26,000 brand new conservation practices were completed by all of you, this partnership in Indiana during calendar year 2019. Extremely impressive. This snapshot just shows that workload by county. The darker counties are the ones that really got after it in this last year, and we'll talk more about that. Slide, please. So some pretty staggering numbers. And if you read into this slide, you can see that it's been an amazing year. Again, thanks to all of you. We're not a for-profit business, right? But when you look at an increase of 18% in workload, just looking at practices year over year, so 2019 compared to 2018, an 18% increase in practice workload is pretty amazing. And that's something to be proud of. I know I am, and it's something I think all of you can be proud of, and something that we can't be afraid to brag about. Because this is pretty astonishing. You can see the top 5 counties that are leading the way here. Whitley, Washington, Adams, Noble, Allen. You see them appear on the map in a darker shade. These counties should especially be commended for this last year because they led the way. And I'll call out specifically the district conservationists in these counties. Typically that district conservationist is the tip of the spear. And if you know some of these folks, pat them on the back because what they accomplished last year with our collective partnership, conservation implementation teams, small water conservation districts is pretty amazing and something definitely that I think people shouldn't be afraid to talk about. Next slide, please. Just kind of giving you a little further breakout of what this looks like. And you know what we're seeing on the left hand of your screen is the workload by programs, many of those popular programs. You can see EQIP's pretty popular here, right? We knew that. You can see EQIP takes the lion's share of our workload over the last year. So said 26,000 practices earlier, over 17,000 of which were EQIP. So EQIP's a big deal in Indiana. On the right-hand side of my screen, you see a breakout by conservation implementation team. Again, this is by practice. This isn't by acreage or dollars, that sort of thing, or new landowners. This is just looking at the practice numbers. It's just a way to kind of quantify and compare things using one kind of basic metric. And you can see that Albion, wow, Northeast Indiana, Albion Conservation Implementation Team really led the way this last year. Dramatic increase. And again, hats off to the folks in that Albion area, those counties highlighted. The partnership is happening there. And a lot of Lake Erie, new dollars have come in that area. That's partly so, but some good leadership, good boots on the ground, and people are getting after it, good landowners. That's what we like to see. Next slide, please. And I'll mention that you can see a lot of my slides have the link kind of below where a lot of this information, again, is coming from. I'm not, we didn't run any kind of special reports. Again, all this information is online and public. Again, just looking at workload year over year, so 18 versus 19, kind of trends over time. Again, you can see the Northeast really kicking butt. And that 18% increase I told you about collectively year over year, you can see the Northeast really led a lot of that. So again, hats off. Next slide, please. I've talked about this in the past, how we're kind of unique in Indiana, that we take all these practices, our workload, what we do, and we generate conservation load reduction outcomes from it. This just kind of gives you a snapshot by watershed where we're seeing sediment reductions, assign some volumes. We also, if you're interested, have a email or a website that gets more specific in smaller watersheds if you're curious about that. Next slide, please. Again, similar nutrient load reduction here, specifically where we're looking at nitrogen. And you can see again our dramatic increase year over year, 15% increase in reduced nitrogen. That's kept out of the water, kept on fields for crops. Again, something to be proud of. Next slide, please. Similar slide with phosphorus. And again, we've got all this information that the team's compiled to get more specific on smaller watersheds. If all of you are looking at grants or looking at something more county specific, that information all exists online. It's at your fingertips. Next slide, please. I mentioned new this year, we're looking at carbon sequestration, and we've just taken a kind of a towing in the water, if you will, of what kind of the limits are here and what the universe could look like in this space. But this just looks at assisted cover crops. So only cover crops really out of EQIP that were cost shared, and we're assigning carbon sequestration numbers. And then you can look at volumes of how many cars, almost 32,000 cars kept off the road last year in Indiana because cover crops were planted just through EQIP. So pretty cool stuff, and a lot more to come here. Again, we appreciate feedback on all these things, but information, metrics, volumes that would be interesting to you, please share with us. Next slide, please. Multi-year benefits. So as we all know, some practices have a long lifespan, right? Multi-years. So we get those benefits like your grass waterway for multiple years. We also quantify that, and you can see just kind of a highlight by watershed where we're seeing some of those longer term practice benefits. Slide, please. And this just kind of gets at that idea when, wetlands, grass waterways, when you put that investment, that work on the ground, you get multi-year benefits. Again, we kind of highlight all that. It's some really cool impacts when you start throwing all these things together. And it just kind of gives you an idea over in your left-hand side of the screen, some of the volumes that we achieve, load reduction, sediment reduction, because of our cool partnership that we have. Next slide, please. I'd be remiss if I was sitting here talking about accomplishments and data, and I didn't mention our tillage and cover crop transect that you all collectively do in the field. And I know it can be long and tedious in a fun day with partners in a vehicle all together. No, we do use that information, and we're being looked at actually nationally because of this collaboration, the information we collect. We're one of the really only states that has this kind of background of data, and we're doing some really cool stuff with it. And we've talked about satellites and how we're using some of this new technology for what the future could entail. But this is just kind of giving you an idea of some of how we are displaying and publishing a lot of that conservation, tillage, and cover crop transect information that you all help gather. Again, bottom line, we're using it. If you are curious about some of these numbers, you don't know what a transect is, shame on you, but go check this link out and you'll find out more. Slide, please. Again, kind of new this past year with Transect, what the team has done here. Again, a lot of it led by Trevor Lowry, Shannon Azula, is taking this information, our historic data sets with Transect, and improving it. So whether that's bringing in some new technology sources like satellite, whether that's making sure our statistics are still all working and jiving and that we're getting an accurate snapshot, that work's being done. You can see this middle map is pretty cool. It's actually the routes you all drive every year with the Transect. We don't do one in Marion, so you kind of see the whole there. But newer this year and online is actually Transect by watershed. So I know a lot of you have been asking for that, districts especially. We're happy to be sharing that information now. So thank you again for all working through the Transect and continuing to collect that valuable data source for us. My last slide here, and I'll hand back to Jill, but just want to mention some other kind of data products that we all collectively put together as a team. Mentioned that a lot of that information I went through is new kind of mobile-based website, but actually what the team's done this year is on that website you can see links to make easy PDF printables of all those maps, all that information, so you don't have to take goofy screenshots. If you want to print something out to hand to a board or a constituent group, if you want to pull some maps out for some slides for a presentation, all that information actually you can click on printable links and it'll spit out maps. And some of those significant water body maps, our main drinking water sources, you can pull kind of key highlights out of that. Congressional districts, for those that go and do those kind of visits and lobby, there's snapshots for those districts in our workload, which I just highlighted, available through these websites. And then this last item at the bottom is kind of for more the techie folks who want more information, maybe researchers out there, kind of that finite, small level, very detailed information. Again, privacy protected throughout all this, but about as fine as we can go, still keeping privacy in mind, is where that data, HUP 12 data download can be found. So again, thank you to our partnership out there. You all make this happen. Again, I'm just kind of the spokesman that's able to highlight this work, and I do that quite often throughout the year and even nationally, and something I'm very proud to do. And want to thank you all for what you do. If it's not obvious, it's been an amazing year when it comes to practice workload this last calendar year, and I think we're in the middle of another very good one here in 2020. So thank you, and I hope to see you all in person here soon. With that, I will throw it back to you, Jill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jordan. Lots of great information. And as Jordan mentioned, all available online. You can also get to it on our Indiana Conservation Partnership webpage, and I'll type that into the chat. Before we move to our next speaker, I just want to let you all know, if you do have questions as we go, you can type those into the chat box, and then we'll address them at the end of the entire presentation. Our next speaker is Marguerite Bolt with Purdue Extension, and she's going to be giving us updates on hemp production in Indiana. Marguerite.
Thanks, Jill. Can we move to the next slide, please? So my name is Marguerite Bolt. I'm the hemp extension specialist for the state of Indiana, and I just wanted to go over 2019 production and kind of what we're looking forward to in 2020. So first off, I think it's important for everyone to know that hemp is largely 3 different unique crops. We have fiber production, grain production, and cannabinoid, or what you may be familiar with, CBD production, across the state of Indiana. So last year, we only had about 5,300 acres registered, so really the most minor crop we probably have in the state. And of that, only 4,000 acres were actually planted and only about 3,000 acres harvested. And I'll kind of explain why that is through some survey data we collected. We also have indoor production in the state of Indiana. So we had about 300,000 square feet planted, and a little more than that actually harvested, because growers can fit in multiple cycles in a year, and they accounted for that. But indoor production is exclusive for that CBD model. In outdoor, as you can see in the photos, we have fiber, grain, and cannabinoid production. Next slide, please. Another thing that's really unique about Indiana, and something that we've been able to take advantage of, is OnFarm Research. So all growers have to participate in OnFarm Research, or if they're processors, they have to have some kind of researching component of their process. So last year, and this will be publicly available shortly, but we have kind of some broad categories of research in Indiana that is going to be replicated this year by many of the growers. So we have growers looking at economics of production. So how does it fit into their farm? We have growers looking at seed and clone quality from different sources. Lots of people are looking at equipment modifications. So can they use existing on-farm equipment and modify it to handle, planting and harvesting of different types of hemp? And then we also have folks looking at different processing methods because fiber grain and cannabinoid production all have a step after harvest. Sometimes it's pretty extensive. Sometimes it's easy as pressing the seeds for a culinary oil, but they all have some post-harvest processing. We have growers broadly looking at agronomics, whether that's fertility, different soil types, spacing, lots of different kind of production-specific research. And then growers looking at pests, diseases, and weed management. Like in the bottom photo, we had growers looking at using plasticulture for within-row weed management, and then lots of variety trials. So we can expect a lot of that again in 2020 because it is still a research year for the state of Indiana, and all the growers had to submit a proposal, and then we'll have to submit a report at the end of the season or end of the year. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that growers registered, 5,300 acres, but only planted about 4,000 acres. And I don't think I need to rehash 2019 growing season, but hemp growers really struggled with the wet weather. There are a lot of issues due to weather from just not being able to get into the field, which I'm sure a lot of us saw in other crops, from just having to scale back because some fields were flooded and some weren't. Some growers just decided not to plant at all last year because it was too late and they didn't want to potentially take a yield loss. So hopefully this year shapes up to be a little bit better for growers and they can actually get into the field. From what I've heard, no hemp has been planted yet, but at Miggs Farm south of campus, we are going to start planting hemp next week. So we are getting really close to planting. Next slide, please. And then you also saw that growers harvested even less than what they planted. And there are a couple explanations for this. I mentioned growers were producing for research. This kind of larger bar of research only, and they were going to destroy their crop anyway, also includes the Purdue Ag Centers or any researchers on an Indiana Institute of Higher Learning that was just going to destroy their crop anyway. But the next, and I think most important category, is that the THC or tetrahydrocannabinol percentage was too high. So for those of you that don't know, this is the psychoactive compound in cannabis plants, and in hemp it's very, very low. But there were, over 30% of growers that had to deal with a THC content that was too high, and they had to destroy their crop because of that. And then the next biggest issue was weed management. So hopefully this year, growers are going to be looking at, monitoring more for THC, working with some more stable genetics, and managing weeds. So we hopefully will be able to get, better harvest numbers. Next slide, please. And on the kind of topic of THC production, this is a really important figure that I show my growers, and something that was a huge lesson learned for not just Indiana producers, but producers across the country, is the relationship between total CBD on the x-axis and total THC on the y-axis. So this is actually from University of Wisconsin. These are a bunch of data points from third-party testing labs in their state that just show there's a really linear relationship between these two compounds. And so when growers are looking to purchase seeds in 2019, they were trying to find the most CBD production, so 15%, 20% CBD production, while staying below that black horizontal line. And what this really shows is that it's very difficult, I would say impossible, to get genetics that are above 12% CBD and remain THC compliant, especially now that USDA has set that dashed orange line as the hard threshold of 0.30% THC. So this is something that growers learned really the hard way. They invested a lot of time and money into production, in some cases, $15,000 an acre, and they had to destroy their crops. So hopefully this year we see much lower amounts of growers having to destroy because of THC content. Next slide, please. Some of the things that came out of 2019 and have really benefited growers this year is the availability of crop insurance. So there's whole farm revenue production and multi-peril crop insurance for growers this year if they go through the application process, and the deadline has expired, but Indiana growers were included in this. Some states weren't, because last year was the first year of any kind of production or research, where Indiana, at least at Purdue, has been researching hemp since 2015 on a small scale. So growers in Indiana were eligible if they met some of the requirements, like having a contract for their harvested material. So they have to actually prove and show that they have a contract from a processor. If they go hot, so if they have that non-compliant THC, they can't make an insurance claim. And then there are some details like previous crops grown, how many years of experience in hemp production, as well as minimum acreage requirements that are greater than what Indiana has set. There are also private insurance options that growers have used in 2019 and may use this year, but mostly for post-harvest insurance, so insuring their crop once it's in storage. And these are through cannabis-specific companies. Next slide, please. Another thing that we learned in 2019 and hopefully will be smoothed out this year is the availability of using, local banks and getting loans. So some growers this year will be eligible for FSA loans. I haven't heard of any Indiana growers applying for any of those loans, but that is an option on the table now. They can also get loans through their local banks and credit unions. And we did have some growers do that last year, but it was mostly for growers that had these established relationships with banks. So, maybe they've been farming for 6 generations in their family, they're deciding to grow hemp, and they have this really long-standing relationship with a bank. And so that has really helped those growers get those loans or get any kind of support because they have that relationship. However, there were a lot of growers that had trouble with both using banks, not even for loan options, just working with banks, working with payroll companies for their hemp-related business. And hemp is very attractive to growers that don't have a lot of crop production experience. So maybe they don't have that history of purchasing farm equipment or purchasing land for production of crops. So hopefully this year, with a year under their belt, in some cases, they'll have a better option when it comes to getting loans or working with banks or even working with payroll services. Next slide, please. On the note of loans and banking and money and finances, really, we asked our growers if 2019 was profitable. And we were pretty excited to see that at least 25% said yes, they made money. That includes for grain, fiber, and cannabinoid production. So this is all of our growers, outdoor and indoor. And they said, yes, it was profitable. So that's really exciting. We have 25% saying they broke even. That's better than losing money in our book because this is a new industry. It's developing very quickly. It's changing, seems like daily. But unfortunately, about 50% of our growers lost money. And there are a couple of reasons for this that I'll show in the next slide, please. One of the biggest reasons was they couldn't sell their crop. And there are some reasons for why they couldn't sell their crop. The majority of growers that have, hemp sitting in barns is that they're holding on to it for a better market value. And I'll show you in a moment kind of what the industry has done over the last year, but they're holding on to their hopefully dried hemp, just waiting to be able to sell to a processor and get a better price than what they had thought they would get at time of harvest. Another big issue is that, contracts weren't honored. So even growers who found a processor, had a contract, thought they had everything figured out, that processor didn't honor their contract. Bankruptcy was a big issue last year. One of our fiber processing plants in Kentucky went bankrupt. A couple large CBD processing facilities in Kentucky went bankrupt. So that was a problem that hopefully is not as big of an issue this year. Some of our growers are working on processing the hemp themselves. So they're building out their own processing facility or operation. So they're just waiting to get that finished. It's a really costly endeavor to build processing equipment. So we do have some vertically integrated operations in Indiana. And then they just can't find a processor, which is challenging. It's hard to find a processor that even is accepting material right now. Next slide, please. So I mentioned they're holding onto their crop for a better price. This is from a website called Hemp Benchmarks. They put out monthly economic reports, but what this really shows is the percent change in the price of CBD biomass and CBD seeds and other, hemp-related products over the last year, from May 2019 up until April. So it's just decreased. It doesn't matter what line you focus on. Overall, the price of CBD biomass has severely decreased. For example, last year, growers were hoping to get $40 a pound for material. When they went to harvest, it was about $15 a pound. And at this point, it's probably about $10 to $7 a pound. So it's really decreased, and they may not actually get anything for their crop in some cases, from what I've heard. Next slide, please. So even though this is a new industry, it's very risky, our growers from 2019 do plan on setting or planting seeds this year. They're gearing up to plant in the next couple of weeks, and they're excited about it. We have new growers actually coming on board this year. I had a call with a prospective new grower yesterday. So there are people who are still trying to get into this industry. We do have an increase in registered acres. We'll see what that actually looks like when we go into planting. Next slide, please. So what can we look towards for 2020? As of about last week, there were 256 total licenses issued. This includes growers and processors. Only 225 of those licenses are people that will be putting plants in the field. When we look at registered acres, we have about 8,700 acres registered. Growers are pretty regularly calling the state chemist to decrease their registered acres, though, because they're realizing, maybe I shouldn't grow 40 acres for cannabinoid production. I really only need 5. So we do have growers doing that on a regular basis. And then for indoor production, we have a whopping 1.74 million square feet planned, but I doubt that it'll be that high. Next slide, please. I wanted to give some additional resources. We have a website, purduehemp.org, that has lots of information about different types of hemp production, processing production, pests. The state chemist is the regulatory body running hemp licenses. They have some great information. I have a USDA link, as well as some links from surrounding states with their programs. Next slide, please. I want to thank everyone who has worked on hemp production since 2015. It was before my time at Purdue. I was still at Michigan State University, but this has been a huge collaborative effort across the College of Agriculture, with state police, with lots of local governments working to bring hemp back to Indiana. So this has been a huge group effort, and I really want to share my appreciation for all of these folks that have contributed over the last 5 years. Next slide, please. And here I'll finish off and hand it back over to Jill, but this is my contact information. We have lots of online webinars coming up. In fact, we have one at 11 today and another one tomorrow at 1. So you can find those on our website or on the Facebook page. But thank you for your attention, and I hope you learned something about hemp production.
Okay, great. Thank you, Marguerite, for those updates. Our next speaker is Roger Colt. He is the Assistant State Conservationist for Management and Strategy with NRCS, and he's going to be sharing information on a new unfunded cooperative agreement and vehicle use. So I'll turn it over to Roger.
Thank you, Jill. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, hear you fine.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So yeah, I just want to take a few minutes just to update the partnership on a new agreement that will be coming your way. So if you remember, in early 2019, the partnership leaders worked together to do the new ICP-wide, that was called an MOU this time instead of a cooperative working agreement. But that is the overarching blanket agreement that the partnership operates under in Indiana. It was not a national template, though we had to have national guidance to help form that document. And so we were required to pull things of value out of that overarching blanket agreement. And it was really, that's where we documented some of the things that we shared as a partnership. So as a result of that, there are some national templates that partners can use to document things of value. And even though there is no money changing hands, it's still a tool that we can put in place to document our partnership together in a formal setting. So that's the name of this supplemental agreement that the partner leaders are working on. It's called an unfunded partnership agreement. And so there are things of value such as office space, equipment, those types of things that the partnership wants to document. Here is what we're using. Here are the tools that we are utilizing as a partnership. So that's what we're currently working on. It mainly is going to involve the service center entities. So it would be SWCDs, maybe the ISDA. And so think about that overarching agreement that we put in place in early 2019. This is an agreement that just kind of slides under that and supports that main agreement. So it may not target all the partners that are on the overarching one. So that's, again, why maybe we just reduce the number of partners that will be involved with this one. So just a few talking points I put together. Again, it's a national template, so we don't have the opportunity to manipulate a lot of the language like we did in the overarching one. This one will be a little more restrictive. Let's see, it's going to cover vehicle use, office space, equipment, and technology. And again, we're not looking at how we are implementing the partnership and how we share resources. We're going to operate the exact same way. This just documents how we operate, and it's a tool to do that. The one item that I wanted to highlight, I think has been a topic of discussion with the partner leaders and in the field, I've gotten some questions from the field, is vehicle use. There really is no change in how we share federal government vehicles with non-federal entities. But the topic hasn't been revisited in a long time. So one thing that this agreement does, it really spells out just really clear in writing what that relationship is and how we operate together. Another thing that came to light last year, and we've discussed this as partner leaders, is the Office of General Counsel, which is the legal branch for USDA. In another state, there was a tort claim filed where a partner was involved in an accident, and it was determined the partner was at fault and they were in a federal vehicle. The Office of General Counsel came back and said that cannot be submitted or paid for through the federal tort claim process. That partner is liable for that damage. And so again, it just brought that up as an opportunity for us as partnership in Indiana to say, hey, just wanted to make sure we were all aware of this. There are even agreements that USDA and NRCS has entered into specifically with a partner for a specific task. And in that agreement, it lists that federal government vehicles can be utilized by the partner. It is still, the liability comes back to that partner if they are at fault for an accident in a federal vehicle. So that's really no change, but it just kind of reinforces that again, because this topic hasn't been talked about for a long time. So the partner is responsible for obtaining that liability insurance, whether it's through their own means, through an organization, however that needs to work. So again, just a topic that is important to us, but just haven't been talked about for a while. I know that the ISDA recently did a survey of the districts to find out the level of federal government vehicle use, and it's not a majority by any means. And so this will not impact everyone, but again, just clarifying, putting things in writing, making sure we're all on the same page. So the timeline, again, been working on these agreements. I admit the virus has set my timeline back a little bit, but it is on my plate. I'm working with the partner leaders to finalize the language and the data, the supporting data of office space, vehicle use, getting that documented for all 92 counties. So I'm looking at an early summer implementation date, and it will be something that is rolled out partnership-wide with the involved impacted partners. So you should see a cover letter with a timeline explaining what the next steps will be for you as a partner. Similar to how we rolled out the overarching agreement in 2019, we want to use that same process. So NRCS and my staff, you'll see a lot of communications back and forth from us. You'll see it delivered from us to you. We'll outline the steps that we were asking you to take, have that signed and send back to us. And then once we get all of those signatures and the agreements formalized, we would send back to all the partners the applicable agreement for your district or ISDA. So that's really the broad overview of what's going to happen, how it will roll out, and a timeline. So there you will see a lot of the details in the agreement. So hopefully a lot of those questions would be answered through the agreement when you see them. So Jill, I will turn it back to you. And again, I'm staying on so we can address maybe any specific questions later.
Okay, great. Thank you, Roger. Yes, and as a reminder, you can type questions into the chat box and we'll address those when all the speakers are done. Our next speaker is an addition to our agenda due to the COVID-19 impacts on the livestock industry. Shannon Azula, our state resource conservationist with NRCS, is going to share some updates on emergency animal mortality. Shannon?
All right, thanks, Jill, and good morning, everybody. Next slide, please. Just wanted to make sure everyone is aware of the issues hitting some of our meat processing plants across the Corn Belt. It's not just Indiana, it's in multiple states, but this is putting a stress on some of our swine producers. The next slide, please. That are faced with a tough decision. You know, their delivery of hogs to the processing plant has been interrupted, and so they may not be able to house that number of animals as they continue to grow, or they may not be able to afford to feed them, and so they're faced with the possibility of having to euthanize those animals and then dispose of them. So I want to make sure everyone is aware that if we know of any swine farmers in Indiana who are faced with this decision, that we do have a unique EQIP opportunity to help pay for the disposal of those carcasses. Now, it's really important that, you know, NRCS and EQIP cannot be used to help the farmer get those hogs to a euthanasia site or to euthanize them, but we can come in after they're euthanized and need disposed of. So we're working very closely with our partners at the Board of Animal Health, IDEM, and Indiana Pork, and they're working diligently to attempt to get some centralized euthanasia sites. And once those are established, or once the herd is euthanized, we can come in with our programs and help dispose of those carcasses. We have $2 million available right now in Indiana through EQIP. We have a variety of options, whether it's on-site burial, hauling to the landfill, composting, or any of these options. And we can work with the farmers to make sure we find the best solution for them and their farm and their herd. So the key point is, if you know a farmer's faced with this decision, have them contact their local NRCS office, and we'll work through the process with them and make sure we can help them dispose of their carcasses when needed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Shannon, for that update. Our next speaker is Rick Foster with Purdue Extension. Rick is the Assistant Director of Extension, as well as the Program Lead for Ag and Natural Resources, and he's going to be giving us updates on Purdue Extension. Rick?
Okay. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Just want to emphasize the importance of this partnership. I think it's stronger than it's ever been. And it's really important that we all work together. We all have different strengths, and we can accomplish a lot by working together. Next slide, please. Okay, first thing I want to talk about is our urban ag program. Historically, Purdue Extension Ag and Natural Resources has done a really good job serving our rural clientele, primarily farmers, but we have not done nearly as well serving urban and underserved audiences. So 2 years ago, when I assumed my current position, we had active urban ag programs going on in Marion and Allen counties. And then shortly after I started, we had a resignation. And so that gave me the opportunity to increase our commitment to urban agriculture. And I did that by creating an urban ag coordinator position with statewide responsibilities. And Nathan Shope was the one we hired. He's doing a great job in that position, and lots of good things are happening. Then we had a couple other vacancies at the county level that allowed us to redescribe conventional A&R educator positions in Vanderburgh and Lake counties as urban ag / hort educator positions. And so this increased investment in urban ag has allowed us to serve audiences we weren't reaching very well before. Although as an organization, we have a long way to go before we'll be where we really need to be. So things are different in urban agriculture than what we normally do. The demographics are certainly different. We have different cultures, different ways of communicating, different levels of trust in Purdue Extension. You know, rural Indiana communities trust us because we've been serving them for over 100 years, and our timeline working with farmers in urban settings is a lot shorter, so we got work to do to build that trust. We're also working with different crops. Obviously, we're not growing soybeans and corn in urban settings. Most of our urban growers are growing vegetables, or some are growing ornamentals. But we have a lot to learn about that. I'll talk about a project we have going on in Fort Wayne at the Johnny May Farm, a little more detail in a minute. But when we started growing vegetables and selling them there, we were surprised to learn that people don't want ripe tomatoes nearly as much as they want green tomatoes. And so we had to adjust our harvest schedule and what we were doing because we didn't understand exactly what the consumers were looking for. And so that's one example of where we had to learn some things. The cultural heritage is also important. Well, what we know we can't do is say, you know, we're from Purdue and we're here to help you, and we're going to tell you exactly what you ought to be doing. And so working with this audience requires that we do a lot more listening and a lot less talking. And for those of us in Extension who spend our careers talking, sometimes that's kind of hard to do, to just be quiet for a while and listen to what other people have to say. In terms of youth development, we're in the process of developing an urban ag curriculum for use in the Gary school system that we hope will be pilot testing this fall if the coronavirus allows us to do that. The curriculum has a lot of the basics of soil health, basics about how to grow plants, marketing, and those sort of issues. And so we're hoping that this can be launched this fall. We're also hoping that this will end up being something that's part of the workforce development plan with the state government. Farm tours are also something that is commonly done in urban farms. It can be educational, but it also can serve as a source of revenue for that urban farm. Soil health is something we're working on in a lot of areas. I'll talk about that more in a few minutes. But some of the problems that we see in urban farms that are much different than our rural farms is that compaction and contamination can be much greater problems than we normally see. And then conservation methods are really important for enhancing the long-term profitability of these urban farms. Next slide, please. So here's just several of the challenges that we are working on in urban ag conservation. Irrigation is important. Most of the time we can do irrigation through trickle irrigation or some system that targets the application of water to the crop. The area that I worked in for 30 years before I took this job, pest management, is important. Many of our urban ag farmers want to be organic, or at least limit their use of pesticides as much as possible. So we're working to develop pest management programs for all those growers. Cover crops and mulches are important. Many of our urban farmers are growing on raised beds, so having a cover crop on those beds helps to reduce the erosion when it rains, and so they don't have to reform those beds as frequently. High tunnels are an important aspect of urban production. You know, growing outdoors in Indiana, if you're growing something like tomatoes, you have about a 4-month window from early July to October where you're actually selling crops and making money. With high tunnels, you can extend that season possibly as much as a month on each end. So by adding 2 months of production there, you can increase the time that you're actually bringing in money by about 50%. So that can be really important in these urban settings. Low tunnels can also be used to extend the season as well. Soil testing is an important factor because of the possible contamination, and so that's something we're working with growers a lot. And then just the composting, recycling plant material, and enhancing soil health are issues that we're working with as well. So next slide, please. So one of the things that we're rolling out right now is what we call a soil health signature program. About 2 years ago, we started the idea of signature programs, and the criteria to be labeled a signature program is that they have to be a high priority item, have potential statewide impact, usually going to have multiple sessions, and can be delivered primarily by county educators. And the soil health signature program, which Walt led the development of that with a team of campus specialists, county staff, and some of our conservation partners. They've developed this program. They've now submitted it for review by a committee, and hopefully approval will come fairly soon. And then we'll begin the process of pilot testing that and rolling it out within the next several months. One of the things that we've been doing is putting a lot more of our programs online, such as the Urban Ag Certificate Program. That was one of Nathan's jobs when he first started working for us. But of course, COVID-19 has pushed us down that road a lot faster than we had planned. And on the Soil Health Signature Program, portions of that are going to be online. Some of it will be in person, some will be experiential learning. So it's going to be a kind of a combination of in-person and online content. Of course, everything depends on the coronavirus going away to the point where we can meet in person again. Kind of the nature of the Soil Health Signature Program is that it's going to have some a core curriculum that everybody will take. And then we're going to have advanced tracks in urban agriculture, organic agriculture, vegetable production, as well as row crops. Okay. Next slide, please. So here's some of the conservation efforts that we're involved in. And I'm going to kind of focus on a couple of those. The first is the soil health cover crop research at the Purdue Ag Centers. Purdue Ag Centers have a limited amount of land available, and it's in high demand by the researchers at Purdue. But Purdue College of Agriculture committed fairly large tracts of land for long-term research and demonstration projects. So as an example, again, Walt's leading a team to put together some long-term cover crop demonstration plots at each of the PACs different cover crop combinations will be tailored to the soil type, the climate, and the crops that are grown in at each of those packs. And we want to make that a long-term thing so that when we have field days, we can, over a period of time, demonstrate, okay, here's the progress that we're making by using these various cover crops. So the other one I want to elaborate on is the Johnny May Farm. This is a farm, an urban farm in one of the poorest neighborhoods in Fort Wayne. There was an old fire station there that was abandoned by the city because the door to the fire station was too small for a modern fire truck to even fit in there. And so Fort Wayne got a grant from HUD, and they refurbished this old fire station. They built a commercial kitchen inside. They built a meeting room, and then they started an urban farm in about an acre of land behind the fire station. And so with it, we've been partnering with the folks in Fort Wayne to run this facility. We're selling vegetables in season in the front of the fire station to the people in the local neighborhood. And this is a neighborhood that doesn't have access to fresh fruits and vegetables. So this is an opportunity for these folks to purchase fruits and vegetables. We also use the commercial kitchen for teaching cooking classes and food preservation classes, and then we have 4-H kids and other meetings in the meeting room. The 10-Point Coalition in Fort Wayne meets at that station before going out into the community. So this is an opportunity where we've been able to take all sectors of Purdue Extension, so Ag and Natural Resources, Health and Human Sciences, 4-H and Youth Development, and Community Development, all doing programs in one location. And so one of our goals is for the Johnny May Farm to become something of a hub for the community, not just growing and selling vegetables, but a place where people can go to learn things and know that that's a place where they can have meetings and those sort of things. And with that, I think I will stop and turn it back to Jill. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rick, for those updates. Our final speaker is Stephanie Alexander with the Farm Service Agency. She is the program leader for the conservation programs, and she's going to be giving us updates on both CRP and the new farm stimulus package. Stephanie?
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay, Jill?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yes, I'm just going to highlight all the activity we have going on right now with our conservation programs. Just like everyone else, we're really busy. And the 2018 Farm Bill extended, you can advance the next slide. It extended the CRP authority through 2023. It also increased enrollment authority from 24 million acres in 2019 to 27 million in 2023. Over the next 3 years, we have the most CRP acres expiring that FSA has had expire in the last 10 years. So Indiana just this year has 4,854 CRP contracts expiring on 9/30/2020, and the total acres is over 34,000 acres expiring. Next slide. So I'm just going to go over some of the programs we have going on right now. General CRP Sign Up 54, it was the 54th general enrollment period. It was held December 9th, 2019 through February 28th, and it was the first general sign up that FSA had since 2016. Approximately 3.4 million acres were accepted into the general CRP Sign Up 54. Of that, Indiana had 22,349 acres submitted, which was over 1,300 offers. And of those offers, almost 1,200 offers were accepted, which included 18,494 acres. So our total acceptance rate for Indiana was 83% for this general sign-up, which was really good. Next slide. Right now, we have ongoing through the year continuous CRP enrollment. So the Farm Service Agency is currently accepting offers for specific conservation practices for new and re-enrolled land under this continuous sign-up 53. Right now, Indiana has about 2,000 offers that have been initiated into the sign-up 53. And the deadline is August 21st, 2020. It's an important deadline for producers who are actually re-enrolling land to be considered for sign-up 53. So that deadline is really important for producers that have expiring CRP practices and they would like to re-enroll that land. Next slide. Right now we have, it's getting ready to close here pretty quickly, it's CRP Grasslands program. And this CRP Grasslands, it gives landowners and operators can protect grasslands while including rangeland and pasture land and certain other lands while maintaining grazing. The program emphasizes support for grazing operations, plant and animal biodiversity for grassland and land containing shrubs, forbs that are under the greatest threat of conversion. So if you have an interested participant, it opened March 16th and it actually closes Friday. So they have until Friday, May 15th to submit those offers. And the grassland program is very similar to the general CRP, where you will submit your offer and it will be ranked using the CRP Grasslands ranking factors. So very similar to general CRP, once all the offers have been submitted, they will rank them and see who gets in and who gets out. To be eligible land must be currently planted to a grass cover. Grazing can take place during the Indiana primary nesting season. Haying, mowing, or harvesting and seed production is authorized, but not during Indiana's primary nesting season. And that is April 1 through August 1. Grazing, haying, mowing, and seed harvesting are subject to NRCS planning policy and specs. Next slide. So this next program is a pilot. It's a new program. It's called Clear 30. And they have just announced this. Sign-up will not be until July 6th, and it will go through August 21st. And this is the first program that's offered participants an opportunity to enroll in a 30-year CRP contract. Our normal contracts go from anywhere from 10 to 15 years. So this is the first time we have offered a program for this long of a period. This pilot is only available in 12 states, Indiana included. Eligible producers must have an expiring clear initiative contract, including continuous CRP cropland contracts with water quality practices or marginal pasture lands, and CRP contracts devoted to riparian buffers, wildlife habitat buffers, or wetland buffers. The contracts will help ensure practices remain in place for 30 years, which will help reduce sediment and nutrient runoff and help prevent algae blooms. Annual rental payments for participants who enroll in Clear 30 will be equal to the current CRP annual payment rental rates, but there will be an adjustment, an incentive. It's going to be 27.5%. So it's going to take those continuous CRP annual payment rates and it's going to increase it by 27.5%. Another unique program feature is that FSA will help producers maintain Clear 30 contract acreage. And we're going to have more details on that. We don't have, they're just basically have given us notice that this pilot is coming and basically educate producers ahead of time that this is going to be an option. And we will have more details once that sign-up period opens in July. All right, so that was conservation updates briefly. We have some other programs that I'm going to give you just kind of some updates on. Our ARC PLC program, we had a record enrollment for 2019. We had producers, 1.77 million contracts were enrolled for ARC and PLC programs for 19. And that was 107% of total contracts if we compared that to a 5-year average. And then 2020 enrollment, it's coming up, the deadline. USDA wants to remind producers that we just completed 2019 enrollment, but 2020 enrollment deadline is June 30th to enroll in your ARC PLC for 2020 crop year. The other reminder that we wanted to give everyone is WIP Plus. USDA has started making payments through the Wildfire and Hurricane Indemnity Program Plus. It's called WIP Plus to producers who suffered an eligible loss. And when this program was first released, excess moisture was not included. So Indiana wouldn't have had a lot of activity. However, excess moisture in 18 and 19 were added as an eligible loss. So that impacted Indiana for the 2019 in particular growing season. So that sign up opened March 23rd, and producers who suffered those losses can apply through WIP Plus. So if you have any producers that are contacting your office about the excess moisture in the 2019 and any relief, have them contact their local FSA office and they can apply for WIP Plus. And lastly, the main questions that we're getting right now is the new CFAP is what they're calling it. It is assistance available through the CARES Act and the Corona Food Assistance Program. On April 17th, 2020, USDA announced the Corona Food Assistance Program, CFAP, using funding and authorities provided in the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act and the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. And it's utilizing USDA's existing authorities. CFAP will use direct payments, commodity purchases, and food distribution to provide certainty to farmers and consumers. So CFAP will provide direct support based on actual losses to agricultural producers where prices and market supply chains have been significantly impacted, and will assist producers with additional adjustments in marketing costs resulting from lost demand and short-term oversupply for the 2020 marketing year that was caused by the COVID-19. CFAP will provide assistance to most farms that have experienced at least a 5% loss, and it will be available to farms regardless of the size. We're still working on the final details and the actual payment rates, and those details will be included as part of the rulemaking process that is going on right now. Once the rulemaking process is complete, application will be open and subject to eligibility and payment limitation criteria. So that being said, we did have a notice that was issued last week giving guidance to our county offices. Just like with our market facilitation program, we had a lot of new producers that maybe had not participated with our office yet. So we have already provided guidance. While we don't have the application and sign up available yet, and we don't have a lot of the details, we do have guidance for new producers that may not participate with us. We can go ahead and get farm records established. We can go ahead and get all that information, get them in our system, get some eligibility started for the producer. That way, when the application process does open, they'll be ready to go. So that is really all the information we have so far on the CFAP program and all I have for you today. I'm going to turn it back over to Jill.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. And thank you to all of our speakers. we are going to move into the question and answer portion of the webinar at this time. And if you have any questions, if you could please type them into the group chat. You can open up that chat box and then type directly into the box. And if you can please designate who your question is for, be that one of our speakers or a specific Indiana Conservation Partnership leader or organization. And I do not see any questions yet. Marion Welsh with Purdue Extension is going to help us moderate these questions. Marion, have you seen any questions that I have missed?
There are no questions that I see of right now.
Okay, our speakers did a great job. Okay, I see a question coming in for Roger. But I don't see the question. There we go. Okay, Marion, I'll let you handle this.
On the agreements, will there be change for partners with rent?
No, office space is not something that will be impacted. Again, kind of how we operate as a partnership, we're planning to do the exact same way as we are. The agreement is not a tool that will change how we operate.
Okay, any other questions? And this can be on the topics that were discussed today or any general questions for any of our ICP organizations or leaders. And while we're waiting to see if anyone has additional questions, I'll remind you that we have an Indiana Conservation Partnership website. It is at icp.iaswcd.org. Thank you to the Association of SWCDs for maintaining that partner website. You can get to a lot of the information covered today and covered by Jordan on annual updates at that page. And I'll also take this time to say thank you to Purdue Extension for hosting today, and special thanks to Ed Dunn and Marion Welsh, who helped get this Zoom meeting set up and running smoothly. So we appreciate you both. Okay, still no questions. This webinar was being recorded and it will be posted within the next 2 days, I believe. And so when that link comes out, we'll be sure to send that out to everyone and place that link on the ICP website so that anyone who wasn't able to watch it today or may have had some technical difficulties can see the presentations. I'm going to give one final minute here for any last questions. Okay, thank you everyone for spending time with us this morning. Thank you to the ICP leaders and to our speakers for being with us today and sharing information. And we look forward to continuing to work together and collaborate on all of the issues we work on. Thank you, everyone. With that, we'll close.